All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today. Really excited to have so many people join in the middle of the day on a Thursday and this almost beautiful spring day here in the Northeast. We are going to be talking about changing viewer behavior, the outlook for CTV in a post-pandemic world. And my name is Xander Kotsatos. I lead our agency sales and brand sales efforts for our buyer platform technology and our Beeswax technology on the demand side. And I'm pleased to be joined by Sabrina Alimi, who's the Executive Director of Advisory Services here at Freewheel. And Sabrina does so many things here at Freewheel, but among them, she and her team produce the Video Marketplace report on a semi-annual basis. And so what we're going to start off with today is going through some of the results and insights for that we received from our second half of 2021 marketplace report. Then I'm going to go through some of the technology that we've released and some kind of macro trends in the industry and how we look at seizing this TV opportunity as we really come out of a post-pandemic world into what I guess a normal streaming environment looks like. I think the world was a little bit shocked, for instance, yesterday with Netflix making the announcement that they might be adding advertising. And, we really look at the ad-supported marketplace as a key pillar to not only the linear TV environment, but also what we can do in streaming. But certainly throughout the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A feature to enter any questions that you have, and we'll leave some time at the end to do this. So we're really excited. This is, again, the second installment in our 2022 webinar series for Beeswax. Look for more coming monthly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina to talk about the VMR and some trends that she's seeing.
Great, thanks, Xander. So I'm excited to share highlights from our latest Video Marketplace report, which we published at the end of March. Our report shows the changing dynamics of how enterprise class content owners and distributors are monetizing their premium digital video content. So as Xander said, this report looks at the second half of 2021, and we're only looking at our US data. Our data set is unique, but it's also very vast if you think about all the companies that use the Freewheel platform. Our data set is an aggregate view of all the advertising collected through the Freewheel platform, which includes both direct sold and programmatic campaigns delivered on ad-supported video content. 90% of the premium ecosystem runs on Freewheel. It's a combination of content owners and distributors, such as the big names that you see on this slide. We see billions of transactions through our system daily, and a majority of those are happening on the connected TVs. We'll talk about that more throughout the trends that we see. So we have a really powerful data set to uncover trends of ad-supported environment. Freewheel's always said that TV is TV. It doesn't matter what device you're watching on, and that's never been more true than today. If we look at the data from last year, we saw a 45% increase in ad views, which are impressions. I'll use the word ad views throughout, but just think of them as impressions. The digital video industry is exciting because of this continual growth that we see every year. There's really two aspects behind that growth. One is more viewing. There are more devices and services than ever before, so it's really easy for viewers to connect to digital content. There's just more eyeballs. The other aspect of it is the advancement in ad serving technology. We can fill breaks with things like more competitive, more precise competitive separation and support for new demand models like Programmatic Guarantee. We're not making breaks longer. We're not creating more ad opportunities, but we're being more efficient with how we're filling them. As the industry matures, as viewers adopt watching digitally, we expect this growth to continue. Most of the viewing that's happening is happening on the television screen, which encompasses both set-top box VOD and connected TV. So that 14% of set-top box VOD, that's if you have a cable subscription and you're renting a box from your cable provider, and then you navigate over to that on-demand section. We're inserting ads dynamically into those shows. While a majority of 63% is the connected TV. Connected TVs are a bucket of two different types of devices. One device that falls into it is smart TVs. So think of your Samsung TVs and Roku TVs, X-Class, which is the Comcast TV. We saw household adoption of smart TVs grew during the pandemic, And we're going to continue to see some growth in that area, as when you go to the store to buy a TV, pretty much your only options now are smart TVs. The apps on those TVs have gotten better, and so we're going to continue to see increased usage, and we expect to see smart TV growth to continue to rise. The other bucket in connected TVs is your external connected devices, so your Apple TVs and your Fire Sticks, your Rokus and your Chromecasts. You have your pick of many different options. Over the year, we saw that category grow significantly, taking over mobile and desktop, which used to be a lot more prominent. CTV is a desired platform similar to linear TV experience that consumers are used to. That big screen engaged viewers, sometimes viewers watching together, so you have that co-viewership as well. But it also comes with challenges. There are multiple devices, and the device ID space isn't quite as mature, and so finding your audiences can be tricky. But it's not just about devices. One of the biggest changes we saw over the years is the number of ways viewers can access content, which ties directly to how a lot of our clients, the content owners, are distributing their content. So you can see here, we've bucketed into about 4 different categories. We talked about set-top box already. It's that box that when you're watching on demand from your cable subscription, you go up that 30% of TV everywhere. That's when you use your cable subscription to log in or authenticate on a content owner's app, or maybe your cable provider's app, but you're still connecting through that cable subscription model. We also have at the bottom that 10% of virtual MVPD. Think of that as your virtual distributors. It's a digital only cable alternative. So think of your Slings or your Fubo or YouTube TV. Similar content experience to the cable bundles you're used to seeing, but it's just a digital only offering. There's no box that you're going to have in your house. The biggest bucket up top is at 46% of streaming services. And that encompasses kind of 2 categories of offerings right now, or apps that you can have. The free ad supported TV, which is your FAST services, as well as our direct to consumers that we've seen a lot of the content owners come out with last year. Think of your Peacocks and your Paramount Plus. This is a offering that has been growing over the years. And last year, we actually saw the streaming services surpass TV everywhere with ad views for the first time. There's new business models coming out. There's different subscription models. Often there's free subscriptions. So we're seeing users adopt that, and as a result, seeing growth in those areas. The key point here is that there's many ways to watch. And so it's not just fragmentation on devices, but now viewers are switching their time across different services as well. As the video landscape continues to expand and fragment, both buyers and sellers are turning to programmatic for efficiencies. We saw significant growth last year as our content owners and distributors became more comfortable with programmatic delivery. Premium TV comes with high expectations around user experience. You need that high quality creative that will display well on that big screen TV, and those TVs are constantly getting bigger and bigger. There are also expectations around what ads are allowed to deliver together in one break. And so we need information about those advertisers that we're selecting. Programmatic Guarantee was a big factor with that 80% increase that we saw, because of the guarantee nature of the deals, and that creative approval really helped sellers be more comfortable with allowing them programmatic into their supply. Right now, programmatic only counts, excuse me, for 23% of total transactions, and that's not just on CTV, that's across devices. And that's going to continue to grow, because right now we see some of our clients are doing a lot of programmatic, others are not doing it as much. There's some in the middle that are dabbling and starting to enable it on more places. But overall, we do expect to see this to be a big focus for 2022, on growth in programmatic. Overall, 2021 is a great year of growth and expansion for the digital video industry. We saw overall growth. We saw viewing happening on that TV screen a lot through connected TVs, and we're expecting to see more adoption in programmatic, just like we saw last year. As the industry continues to expand and evolve, Freewheel and Beeswax technology are here to help both buyers and sellers navigate across it. So please check out the report on our website. It's free to download, and I appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks so much, Sabrina. I really appreciate it. And obviously very cool to see across the board, just tremendous growth. I'm going to talk a little bit about seizing the opportunity here and certainly a little bit about the technology investments that we're making. But I thought it might be interesting really quickly just to talk about not only what we're seeing, but sort of third party verified, if you will, trends across the industry, because everything that's coming out from third parties jives directly with what you just went through, right? 4 in 5 US households now have some sort of OTT device. And on average, people are watching about 75 hours of content per month. What's really interesting is how they're looking at this content and how they're consuming this content, but also, because I think a lot of what we just went through is all about consumer behavior and ad views and devices. But it is interesting to note how advertisers are responding, because I think there's sort of this prevailing theory or thought that advertisers are maybe a little bit slow to respond or maybe over investing. What we see on our side and what's going on in the ecosystem as a whole for this upfront, there's going to be nearly $6 billion of CTV upfront spend transacted digitally, which is a tremendous increase over only a few years ago. What's also interesting is as the linear buyers and as the CTV negotiators, both on the publisher side and on the advertiser and agency side, are getting more into connected television and the digital ecosystem, they're still transacting through private deals, many of the similar or same ways that they transacted in linear. And that makes CTV very, very different from what we saw, at least initially, in the programmatic space on desktop or in mobile, where it tended to be open market, remnant inventory first, and then later kind of the big brand dollars shifted over. In this case, yes, there's some open marketplace buying, but increasingly we're seeing premium spend on CTV through these private deals, either private marketplace deals or programmatic guarantee deals. And that is really changing the way that people are looking at buying in this landscape and the way that this landscape is transacted. So we're going to talk a little bit about our investments, particularly on that kind of private deal side and the data that enables and how it kind of connects to linear television. I wanted to briefly level set. We went through this last month on the first installment of this series, but in case anybody's unaware, Beeswax was acquired by Comcast in January of last year. And we roll up into the larger Freewheel organization within Comcast advertising. As we looked at brands and agencies as a group of customers and ad buyers that we wanted to transact with more on the buy side, what we decided is that the way that Beeswax is built, and many of you might know, is a single tenant bidder as a service model, kind of a unique DSP for every client. And so what we decided to enable us to continue to invest almost explicitly on that bidder as a service model is to actually make a brand new Beeswax DSP a client of the bidder as a service model. So one of those many DSPs, and then put everything that really differentiates Freewheel and Comcast within that shared bidder. And so that aligns us with all of our customers on the bidder as a service side, but it also gives us the flexibility to incorporate what's great about Freewheel and what gives us kind of that competitive edge with Comcast. And as Sabrina went through, you know, Freewheel, the core technology is a publisher side ad serving technology. So essentially taking all the direct deals that publishers do, all the network deals that publishers do, all the agency deals that publishers do, the programmatic supply side deals from publishers, making sure that the trains run on time, that the right ad goes to the right buyer, that the right advertiser is seen for the right impression. And we do that. We're the ones that do that for about 90% of the premium TV ecosystem. And what that means in practice is pretty much every logo that's on your linear television guide, right? All of the digital properties, many different MVPDs, some of the new virtual MVPDs, including Zumo, who we own and operate, Pluto, et cetera. And what we get from the Comcast side is a ton of data from our own first party technology, right? Being the ISP, being the set-top box, right, for Xfinity, but then also all the relationships we have with other cable providers, carriage agreements with the other linear cable providers, data we get from our publishers in some cases, credit bureaus, and different pieces of the co-op. And so the three core CTV challenges that we set out to figure out how we could solve were, number one, in this environment of more eyeballs moving to CTV, but more dollars moving to CTV, and a lot of the private transactions, meaning that CTV, the really good stuff, the inventory is scarce. And in the open market, there is a pretty considerable fraud problem. One of the reasons why CTV experiences increased fraud versus other channels is essentially if you're a fraudster, every time you make a fraudulent transaction, it's a risk on a per impression basis. So you'd much rather do that in an ecosystem where the CPMs are $15 to $30 plus versus say the mobile app ecosystem where they often are less than $1, right? You get 10x, 100x return. What we're doing on our side is streamlining access to our premium supply. We have both demand and supply side tech. We'll talk about some of the off-the-shelf OpenRTB transaction types that we have, as well as a brand new transaction type that goes directly through the ad server. Number two is around CTV being limited, right? In general, the providers out there are either kind of legacy panel-based approaches, right, which have some very key advantages, things like national scale, things like great modeled data, but a real drawback is the seed data often is 10,000, 100,000 people, etc. And so when you're trying to model that to 350 million people nationwide, there are some drawbacks. You can't be that confident in the results, right? There's also a lot of kind of newer players who bring ACR data or bring data co-ops of their own, or have various digital inputs or household inputs. And all of that is helpful, believe me. But at the end of the day, the nice thing about sitting on top of the Comcast viewership data is we have 1 in 4 households where we are either the ISP or we actually power their linear cable, as well as all of our carriage agreements and other providers. And so where nobody has 100% share of voice, but where we have to model, we're just coming from a place of such high confidence to start with. It gives us a much better view. And number 3 is around reporting and measurement. At its base level on a smart TV, people are usually not clicking on ads, right? So we know that ad is still valuable. It's 100% share of voice on the biggest screen in your house, right? But who in the house saw the ad? How did the household as a whole respond? Is there an ROI from that? Does it get kind of check the box for a direct response or brand ad? Is it incremental to what would have been done anyway? These are the questions that we're kind of mulling over and what we are thinking about on our side. And I'll talk about how we are using our identity and some investments into incrementality measurement and ghost bidding to kind of resolve all of these concerns. So, first and foremost, when we launched the Beeswax DSP, the first thing we did is we worked with the Freewheel marketplace activation team, and we launched our own set of curated channels. So obviously, a lot of our publishers have channels of their own, right? Publishers and sub-publishers and networks and shows. What we can do based on having the ad server on our side is we can sort of bucket not only the channels, but the shows into very specific content segments. And we can usually get really good rates, $14 to $23 CPMs, nearly 100% view through rate, guaranteed 100% premium publishers on our 70 plus, sites and apps. So from our standpoint, this is a really great kind of starting point. It's off the shelf for every single customer that starts on the Beeswax DSP. We also give those customers a concierge service with our marketplace activation team so they can negotiate audience aware custom deals, and they can negotiate direct deals with the publisher for programmatic guaranteed, etc. As we move into 2022 here, what we wanted to do is essentially automate this process. So on the whole, Freewheel is going through a massive project internally to actually migrate our publishers from the legacy SSP pipes so that all of their inventory is actually standardized and lives within the ad server. That doesn't mean that that inventory can't be accessed through the SSP anymore, but what it does mean is that for the instances where a buyer can actually transact within the ad server, they can get forecasting data and additional information on the entire waterfall of what a publisher sees. And so it knows, if a programmatic transaction is actually going to be going to a direct deal, or if something is going to be on the open market, or it's a private marketplace deal. And so what this tool within Beeswax, and we're calling it Freewheel Advanced Deal Access, gives the ability for a buyer to do is add publishers at will, essentially any participating publishers, the duration of the ad that they're looking to buy, and then targeting data such as DMA, and then know in a very specific way, not just what the bid floor is, not just what the estimated clearing price is going to be, but an actual range and an actual total number of opportunities based on the targeting set and based on the price that that advertiser is willing to pay. And this is something that is brand new. It is not available in the marketplace today. What allows us to do this is it's actually not an open RTB transaction. As I mentioned, we've moved and standardized a whole bunch of our publishers, with more coming within the Freewheel ad server. And this is actually a buy-side module into the ad server. And so in addition to giving us data that is not available in OpenRTB and giving us lower latency than RTB, and removing the supply-side platform tech entirely and removing a whole rung of the programmatic supply chain from RTB, we also have the ability to verify both sides of the transaction. And so the possibility for fraud goes down to next to zero. And so we're really excited to roll this out. It is in beta. We have a few customers online, and we look forward either end of Q2 or Q3 to rolling it out to GA. GA, by the way, is general availability. The second piece that I talked about is around Comcast audience data. So again, Comcast has 1 in 4 households. We have a ton of relationships with other data providers with dispersed pockets of coverage throughout the country, right? We get a lot of really interesting data from the set-top box. And so Beeswax is now the only DSP that offers this data from a deterministic standpoint. And so far we have 3 categories. This product is also in beta. Throughout the year, we're going to be releasing more categories. But at its face, you know, for the first time from a deterministic standpoint, buyers can come to Beeswax and get ensure that their CTV is truly incremental to what they're doing in linear. We have a segment that is cord nevers and cord cutters, right? We've also broken up existing viewers into deciles. So, you know, for certain types of ads, advertisers could come to us and say, we want people who watch a lot of TV or some TV or a mix of OTT and CTV. We also have all of our content broken up into genre. Obviously, the channels have the content in genre, but the nice thing about the linear genre content is that then we can add individuals to genres that they watch a lot. So sports, DIY content, etc. And then advertisers can buy those audience and find those users anywhere they want, anywhere digitally, etc. And then finally, what's really exciting is we've actually taken the 500 biggest spenders on linear cable, and we're allowing customers to actually target households that have seen a specific brand within those 500 a certain number of times. And so this has wide-ranging implications for a ton of use cases, but obviously conquesting is a good use case, heavying up for that brand, or making sure that there's true incrementality for that brand, or even just mimicking a schedule of a similar advertiser within a vertical. There's a lot of different kind of opportunities out there, but this is, you know, an FCC linear area. And so we have that ad exposure data and we're offering it to our customers. It's worth noting this actually does not have to be spent necessarily on Freewheel supply. And so while we definitely want to talk about the synergies with our premium supply and with this data, it can be used across any of Beeswax's supply side partners. And while we do have that Freewheel advanced deals access, Beeswax is still agnostic and open RTB to every single provider. And so we're really excited about these solutions. What I would like to leave you with is some of what we are working on for the rest of the year. So number one, kind of our North Star from a buy side is a single marketplace and a unified future for all of TV. So TV everywhere is not a new term, but we are in a unique spot to actually make that a reality, right? So number one, kind of at its basic level, to the ability that we can use a lot of the set-top box data to do universal frequency capping. That is something that we will look to release either end of year or early 2023. Additionally, as I mentioned at the outset, reporting and measurement is really tough. We have kind of a cross-channel measurement between linear and digital that is available today, but we are making investments into things like ghost bidding. And if you're unfamiliar with the term ghost bidding, go back to our webinar and our YouTube channel from last month where Kurt, who heads up our product, talks a little bit about it. But essentially, it allows clients to run A/B tests for incrementality without having to spend money on a holdout group and PSAs. So if you have an 80-20 split between your exposed and your control, you no longer have to spend that money on the control. We can essentially fabricate that for you. So reach out to your Beeswax rep if you want to learn more about that, but that's something exciting that's launching this quarter. What perhaps is most interesting, which is sort of the holy grail, is our identity resolution technology that's coming out, either in Q4 or Q1. And so this new technology, built on top of what we just talked about from the audience segment standpoint, will allow us to actually use the Comcast graph, the federated graph, to onboard users. And it'll also allow us to resolve those users digitally. And so lots coming down the pipe, lots more tools from an audience targeting and campaign management standpoint. But that's essentially where we sit today and what we're excited to solve for the industry. And so we'd like to go a little bit to Q&A here. So what I'm going to do is stop share and jump over to our Q&A tab. And so certainly feel free to put questions in that Q&A tab. And actually, Sabrina, what I'm going to do is kick the first question over to you, because a lot of what the VMR is about, right, is kind of what things looked like in the second half of 2021. So one question that's come up is, do we have any predictions for 2022? I might have led the witness a little bit talking about Netflix earnings yesterday and what they mentioned around adding in ads to the free content, but obviously Warner Media and Discovery have merged. There's all sorts of things happening throughout the streaming industry. We're not going to, turn you into an oracle here, but do you have any kind of hot takes on what we're going to look like in the first half and second half of this year?
Yeah, I mean, like, the industry has been fascinating to follow. There has been a lot of mergers, new products coming out to market. And we really do see the ad-supported models to continue to mature and grow as clients are coming out with more subscription models. And so we do expect to see continual growth, which we do see year over year. But I think the big trend we're going to see is, what does the ad experience look like on all those different models? And so some are heavy ad loads and a lot of are more sponsorship oriented. And so, we'll see overall growth, but the question is going to be, when you're buying, what's that experience what's the actual ad experience that you're getting to, depending on what type of app you're delivering onto, and what's the ad experience that the viewer has. Are you competing with a lot of ads, or are you dealing more with more of a sponsorship lighter ad load?
Sorry, I was on mute. Do you think there is a real or near-term future where CTV ads, because of some of the ability you have from personalization in digital, start to look pretty different from a typical linear ad? Because I think people have experimented with rich media and CTV, right, and various experiences. A lot of that happens endemic on various platforms today, right, like Amazon Prime or Hulu, etc. But do you think at scale in programmatic, as the space grows and grows, do you think we'll see more of that? Or do you think for the foreseeable future, it'll be kind of a repurpose, if you will, of the linear ad experience?
I think it'll be more repurposed for the foreseeable future. I think there's always that balance, right? If people are watching on connected TVs, they're watching on a television screen, is it a lean back experience or a lean in? How much are they willing to pick up their remote or phone to interact? And so I do think you'll get more customization with addressable capabilities, but actual interaction in a true rich media. Also, just the amount of devices and operating systems out there to be able to make that work. I just don't think we'll see that in the next few years, but maybe 5 years down the line.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's almost hard to imagine what 5 years looks like, because I think 5 years ago we would not have thought we would be here. I guess this second question or third question is sort of more for me, which is around the supply migration. So just more about what that means about us moving suppliers from the SSP to the ad server, and then are there any other use cases? So yeah, and this is obviously across Freewheel. We're doing this. So the migration of publishers to the ad server just gives a lot more visibility, a lot more control, certainly for publishers, because now all of their programmatic sits next to everything on the buy side, but also on the advertiser side, to the degree that publishers want to release the information. The standardization of this taxonomy eventually can support things like network level and show level data, which is not available in OpenRTB today, right? I know that's been a conversation on the IAB, and our head of supply product management at Beeswax has been sitting in on a lot of those conversations. Obviously, sitting on the buy side, we are big proponents of that increasingly. If you think about the open web in a cookie-based environment, I mean, at this point, we can bid at the ad slot level at a deep URL, right? We know surgically where every ad is going. In this case, we know who it's going to in OpenRTB. We know when it's going there. We know the app environment and where it's going, but where from a location standpoint. But we really don't know exactly the content that we're buying, right? We really only know the content owner. So what are the other use cases? This non-guaranteed use case, if you will, this off-the-shelf kind of packaging of publisher content is a great use case. There's also the ability through a similar type of tech to mimic a linear schedule. So we are actually doing that quite a bit for political advertisers now, where because there's a lot of movement, obviously, in politics this year, with this being a midterm election, where they can mimic their digital and linear schedules. I think there is future use cases around getting more into the upfronts, allowing, maybe the negotiation still happens offline, but a one-to-one with advertisers and publishers to have that conversation and be able to transact in a more automated way. The interesting thing is, I said at the outset that the upfronts are moving more digitally. In general, most of those dollars are still transacted the same way they were before the internet even began, right? Maybe not faxing contracts over, but certainly attaching a physical contract to an email, sending it over, sending creative, sending audiences, and having that all assembled on the publisher side. And you put that next to the way CTV is transacted through most demand side platforms, and it's pretty different. So I don't know whether it's going to look exactly the same on both sides, but there's definitely a lot of opportunity for less friction in that transaction. We have one more question, which is, with the move of sports to streaming platforms, so the example being like the MLB or the Olympics on Peacock, does Freewheel / Beeswax have a way to deliver ads based on user location, household versus bar / restaurant? Sabrina, why don't I let you take that first, and then I've got my own thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it just really comes down to what information we know about the subscriber for the app, or whether it's a cable subscription. If you think about it in the cable world, the cable providers know, is it a business subscription or is it a personal house subscription? And so, the question is, if you're watching on Peacock, for example, if you're watching the Olympics, what do we know about those users? You can always do geo-targeting, but that doesn't necessarily tell you enough context around the environment. You may be able to kind of figure it out based on where it is location-wise, as far as in more of a neighborhood versus in a city. But it really just comes back to the data set that you have and how we create segments on top of it. So in theory, yes, we can do that, but it depends on what data set we have and how that's grouped together.
Yeah, great point. I think, from a linear behavior standpoint, our answer would be those Comcast Plus, those Freewheel Comcast Plus segments. I think I mentioned, but the 3 buckets that I talked about today are kind of our starting point. And throughout the year, we're going to launch, certainly within genre, much more granular segments. So I don't know whether that answers the question, but it certainly does answer the question of, if people are watching very specific types of content on linear, can we mimic or can we find them on digital? The answer is yes. If they are increasingly watching on digital devices, I think outside of using the new Freewheel marketplace and relationships with publishers to get more granular access to specific shows, etc., the way to do that is still to negotiate offline, and then have a programmatic guaranteed deal or a private marketplace deal that specifically represents that type of content. But in general, the Freewheel Comcast Plus segments, again, the location piece here, like we're going to know the household, right? We can't let any Comcast data out of our walls, but still open information like IP address for ad exposure will be shared. So those types of things are possible, but yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot to work out on all sides, and making sure that publishers feel comfortable with what data they're providing, that advertisers feel comfortable with their level of transparency, and most importantly, that consumers feel like their privacy is protected. And it's a delicate dance for everyone.
I think it is really interesting. You start to see in bars, in settings like that, you are starting to see some more of the streaming services up on the TV and not always traditional cable. And so it'll be really interesting to see how the advertising experience might change based on that. And also just, how do we count viewership, right? Is it still a single view, or is there a way for us to do more of that co-viewership experience and measurement?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, in general, one of the unlocks, I think, for streaming, there's a big conversation right now, like, is streaming actually more expensive once you subscribe to every platform, right? And then you might still have linear cable. But one of the unlocks, I think, for virtual MVPDs is that a la carteness, where if you are an NBA fan and you're out of market, you can subscribe just to NBA League Pass, for instance. And for a bar, that's great, because it means you can have 5 different games up on the screen, and you don't have to have a linear cable subscription, etc. It also seems like Apple TV might get the rights to NFL Sunday Ticket, which is, I think, for almost the entirety of its existence, been only on DirecTV, which is really interesting, which is different than the NBA League Pass, which has been available on pretty much any platform, right? So it's interesting to see the differences in the ways that different, the big 4 sports networks are approaching this. The NFL obviously has always had kind of a national approach, but a gated national approach. And the NBA and the NHL and the MLB have always had a local approach because there are just a lot more games. But we'll see how it all transacts. It's fun to watch. So unless anybody has any other questions, I think that is it. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And we hope to see you next month. We'll be promoting our next installment of this series. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day.